Now I can start. An 82-year-old man who by the standards of this congregation is young, I will have you know. An 82-year-old man lost his wedding ring and he found it in a carrot in his own garden. Well, now you got to go back a picture. That's the one he found. But this kind of thing has happened before because carrots are very good at finding lost objects. A woman who lost her wedding ring in 1995 found it 16 years later, and another woman who lost a diamond ring found it 13 years later. The moral of this story appears to be that carrots can see underground. We have all done it. We have all lost things and then torn the house apart looking for it. I don't know how many times I've called my own phone, but then if it's on mute, it does me no good at all. Our phone, our keys, an item of jewelry, a book, an important document. Back in the day when I had hard contact lenses, and you used to hear about this a lot more, if one would just pop out, the panic. You remember everybody saying, contact lens, stop! And everyone looking at every single square inch to find that one tiny thing. Jesus uses this very common experience of lost and found to teach us something about God. Now, the context here is important. Tax collectors, who were viewed as collaborators with Rome, essentially, and therefore traitors to their own people, and a group broadly known as sinners, were gathering around to hear Jesus. The Pharisees and the leaders, the teachers of the law, were very unhappy about this. They were overheard muttering. I love that word, muttering. Have you heard people mutter before? They were muttering. This man eats with sinners and welcomes them. Jesus not only welcomed these suspect individuals, he actually ate with them, which to respectable members of the town implied approval of their lifestyle. How could Jesus possibly be a good man if he kept such bad company? At my age, I feel like singing Bad Company now, but you get the point. In response to the criticism, Jesus asked two questions. But the way he asked them, we, ignorant of the time and culture, we think, well, the answer obviously would be yes. In the terms he says it, he begins as if it was self-evident, saying, suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together saying, rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. If we could have seen the expression on their faces when Jesus said this, we would know that the answer to that question would be no. No shepherd in his right mind would abandon 99 sheep in order to go off and find that one that wandered off and was probably already a wolf's dinner. It would be more than his job was worth. It would be highly irresponsible. Now, if there was a group of shepherds working together, then it was plausible that maybe they would send a junior member of the firm off to find that lost one in the hopes of finding more than a sheep's carcass. But apart from that, this story of Jesus makes no sense whatsoever. Shepherds don't abandon their flocks to find lost animals. And they don't continue to abandon their flocks by then going into town with the stray and telling everyone to gather around and have a party with them because they found their lost sheep. It just doesn't happen. This would be the act of a lunatic. The next illustration Jesus gave was slightly more plausible, but still unlikely. He said, or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." If 10 coins constituted one's entire wealth, then a lost one really would result in an all-out, no-holds-barred search for it. But would she really call everyone to rejoice with her? In this culture, that meant throwing a party, which involves food, which involves expense, which uses up the coin, which rather defeats the purpose. Most women in this situation would have just heaved a huge sigh of relief and then pretended that they had never lost it in the first place so that they did not look foolish to their neighbors. Jesus is not telling us what normal people do. He is telling us what God does. Unclean people, people who were rejected by the religious establishment, were drawn to Jesus. And Jesus was accused of being evil himself as a result. But the people who came to Jesus were not seeking approval of all the bad decisions and unethical acts they had ever committed so that they could continue to do wrong. Immoral people weren't enticed by Jesus because he was the most immoral of all and they could all get together and commit crimes. Broken people, lost people came to Jesus because in Jesus they found goodness, compassion, and understanding. They experienced acceptance. They were not condemned, and it was tangible. Jesus was mercy in incarnate form. And he proved it by the very fact that he was willing to sit down and share a meal with them. Table fellowship was the litmus test. If someone really accepted you, they ate a meal with you. Anything else was just talk. These people had no way back to God because the religious people of their day had closed and barred the door. They had made the standard so high and so impossible, no one could get past it. But these people came to Jesus because with Jesus they felt that they were in the presence of God and he did not despise them. We never hear Jesus reaming out a tax collector or a prostitute or any of the other sinners that sought him out. He did have a few choice words for the Pharisees that were self-righteous, for people who were full of pride, for who were exploiting others in the name of God. Yes, those he called whitewashed tombs. But never did he condemn or lecture wounded people. Were the religious people happy about this? Not a bit. Thus, the two illustrations about the extravagant love of God. God apparently does not look at us as bad, but rather as lost. There is a profound difference between the two. For many people, sin is just a legal category. We have done something wrong, we are guilty, judged, and put on the shelf. That's it, all done. But think about that sheep that got lost. Sheep are very social creatures. We are much more like sheep than we would ever want to admit. A lone sheep is, in fact, a very unhappy sheep. One sheep that got separated from its flock was found stuck on a balcony from which they had great difficulty getting it extricated because when it looked through the window of the balcony in the house or apartment that it was looking into, there was a mirror and it saw another sheep. And it didn't want to leave its friend. Okay, not real bright, but we can understand. But apart from gross negligence on the part of a shepherd, there are only two real reasons why a sheep would get lost. The most likely is that it ran away in fear. Something happened to startle and terrify it, and it ran, and it couldn't find its way back. The other is maybe it was inordinately curious about something and not paying attention. I'm pretty sure this is how the sheep got its head stuck in a bucket. Or the one that got stuck in a fence. Or the poor soul that got stuck in the tire swing. And you can Google that poor sheep in the tire swing as it runs and swings and cannot get out. I don't know how long they tormented the poor thing by not helping it because they were laughing at it. Not fair. So curiosity can cause us some problems. Fear can cause us more. We can blame that sheep that is precariously perched on the rock or the cliff edge. We can yell at it. We can lecture it. Is that going to do much good? Or we can just rescue it. Which is going to solve the problem? The Pharisees and religious leaders wrote off the people Jesus helped. In their eyes, they weren't even people. They were not worth the trouble bothering with. They were ignorant, law-breaking, and beyond the pale. And who are the same ones in our society that we throw away? Certainly the thousands upon thousands who have been locked up in prisons. We label them, condemn them, and strip them of their right to vote. And no matter what they go on to accomplish in life afterwards, we remind them constantly of the mistake they made and prevent them from moving on. We don't give them the grace of God they need. Who else? Traditionally, addiction has been viewed as a moral weakness. There are still some people who say, oh, no, they're not an alcoholic, they're not an addict, they're not weak. Only in recent years have we begun to truly grasp that this is a physiological condition. This is a medical issue. And in our history, and even at times today, the LGBTQ and trans community has been rejected. After World War II, not many people know this, when the camps were liberated, there was one group of prisoners who were not liberated and who were not paid reparations. The gay people. The gay people were taken from the concentration camps and sent into a prison. Because the people even agreed at that time with the verdict of the Nazis that this was a group that was subhuman. Who are the people that we write off? Poor people. Poor people have never been popular. we write off the poor and the uneducated. And class was certainly part of the picture with the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, because they owned things. They had money. They possessed fine clothing and scrolls. It's kind of easy to be righteous when you're comfortable. They had the leisure time to argue fine points of the law because they weren't struggling to feed themselves day by day, moment by moment. They weren't cold and homeless. The tax collectors made money, so they had things, but it was dirty money, so they were not accepted. But as for the rest, the poor and uneducated, struggling to get by day, who had to do whatever they could to survive, it was easy to write them off. But God does not write anyone off. Each and every life is precious to God. Each and every lost person is sought out in order to be saved and brought home. So are people lost or bad? How do we view them? Despite the tactics of the hellfire and damnation preachers, I don't know anyone who has come to faith by being condemned. I certainly didn't. But boy, oh boy, was God ever after me like a hound dog. I couldn't get away from God. I kept trying really hard. I managed for a few years as a teenager to be an atheist, but before I knew it, bang, God got me again. I went and drew the lucky genetic straw in the family and became an alcoholic. Got sober as a senior in high school and was told that if I wanted to stay sober, I had to find a power greater than myself. Well, that's just not fair. I even remember being in an AA meeting in the basement of a church somewhere and turning around and finding a poster that was modeled after the old Uncle Sam posters, the closest version of which I could find we're going to show, of Jesus saying, "Jesus wants you." Subtle God, real subtle. I finally caved. God chased me until I said, I give up. I surrender. I was lost, but my shepherd always knew where to find me. God is not concerned with blaming us. God is concerned with finding, healing, and restoring us. God will search high and low until we are found. God actively seeks those who are lost and throws a party when another child is brought home. No shepherd in his right mind would leave the 99 and go searching for the one who is lost. But thanks be to God, that's exactly what God